Hello, my name is Katea Murray. Welcome to Cyber Talks. I'm a cyber engineer and technical fellow here at Leidos in the intelligence group. At Leidos, we're fortunate to work and support our customers in various market spaces such as health, civil, defense, and the intelligence sector. We're also very fortunate that we're able to help build technologies to support and defend our nation against cyber threats. Today's talk focuses on cybersecurity and how we can accelerate the use of research and development to inform and deter advanced cyber threats. The main question for today stems around the challenge of how do we improve security gap identification? How do we improve our methods to help bolster our security defenses and deter advanced threats? It's not new. It's an age-old question that many ask each time there's an attack. How do we identify gaps faster? Is there a better way? More importantly, is there a way that we can deploy an enhanced strategy that will help us identify gaps just a little bit faster? And today's cybersecurity landscape, we know it only takes one successful attack to render a system useless. These attacks not only damage the targeted system, but can threaten public safety, the economy, the national security. Lately, we have seen a rise in attacks on the supply chain and critical infrastructure systems that have disrupted operations. These cyber attacks using ransomware, exploits, or trusted software's updates, they're not new attacks, yet they've rendered the defenses that are in place rather useless lately. The design implementations of defense systems are continuously changing to react to real-time threats and behaviors. So the question remains, when we build out our security defenses, how do we go about thinking about one threat, that if it was successful, will completely disrupt everything? So the key here is that we still want to ensure, are we being careful that every technology we introduce brings a new attack surface? So we don't want to have a recursive problem. When it comes to cyber threats, the exploitation and effects delivered against us to deny or degrade or destroy influence is constantly evolving, right? So our cyber landscape is constantly changing every minute, every day. The adversary cyber operations have evolved and will continue to evolve. New exploits, effects, new techniques are taking advantage of our larger attack surface across multiple domains. They take advantage of current environments, maybe COVID impacts or election security. And those targets that they aim to affect, they will always have an impact. They will always involve. And needless to say, just about everything nowadays is a target, whether it be technology or even humans. Targets are even more connected, where we have systems of systems, technology within technology. We know that the threats will continue. We know that the threats will continue to evolve. And we must assume that the adversary is at least as good as we are, that we will be attacked and those attacks will be successful. And while we require full resiliency, operating in a predictable, reliable manner through an attack to help advance cyber defenses, the question we have to ask is the predictable manner and the use of automated layers in security, is it doing enough? How does our current strategy help inform better defenses and deter advanced cyber threats? So in chess, a player knows the boundaries of the game. They know the board, the players, their opponents, and in most cases, they know their first move before they make it. They visualize how the game will go. They anticipate their opponent's move and the responses to that anticipated move. They have a plan for their own moves and responses as well. So like in chess strategy, when deploying defense mechanisms, the current strategy we see to identify gaps relies on practices, processes, and techniques used for decades. Our response and reactions are predefined. We've automated our defenses via software, hardware, and people that we rely on to automatically respond to threats. And we think of it in the ways where we deploy our intrusion detection systems, our firewalls, implementing zero trust and more security controls. We trust that the defenses in place will be activated if there's a threat. In our current strategy, we have knowledge. We have some knowledge of our adversary tactics and techniques, right? We understand the moves that they will make in an attempt to exploit our defenses. We know the type of software or tactics they use because we've seen them before or we've used them ourselves. a lot of the training that we do and the exercises are against today's systems and responses. So red teams and blue teams, they train vigorously to identify gaps in the current defense systems. But in most cases, they're training against today's systems, which might not incorporate technology that's not available yet, that hasn't been released. These teams train and they're imposed with boundaries and guidelines that are sometimes deployed because we incorporate the predefined response mechanisms and knowledge of our adversary. So they're working within a rule set and boundary that we've defined almost within the limitations of a chessboard. The response to keep systems up to date and by be it patching or firmware is common, where we're implementing and deploying most likely that philosophy to respond and mitigate to a threat. The problem here is that the moment that patches are issued, our adversaries are busy reverse engineering them to find out if there's a vulnerability in the latest patch or the latest firmware. And because we have those predefined boundaries and practices, means our security teams must first test out the patches. They must first test the firmware before they can release it or deploy it within the environment that we're in. And this always will provide a window for a threat actor. So overall, when we look at our current strategy, we see that it focus is more heavily in reliance of evaluating the current systems for security flaws and gaps through series of test events, looking through outdated software, or usually being informed by third-party software if there's a vulnerability from the vendor. But in some ways, the way our strategy works is more reactionary in nature as opposed to being more proactive in nature. So while our current strategy provides us the ability to protect and defend our systems, we will continuously find ourselves asking the questions, what else can be done? Is there a way to be more proactive in threat identification? So R&D investments that focus on modeling the threat activity allows one to explore and consider the attack point of view. In some circles, the term adversary emulation comes to mind. The key here is that there's no set implementation of how to do this, or there's not a best practice. So that is what we want to use more R&D to aim to achieve and to build and create better and faster methods to identify gaps. The focus on modeling the threat actor activity will allow us to gain more in-depth perspective to identify gaps in the system of systems, in the technologies, the processes, and the people, the actors themselves. The model threat actor view will look at each part of the environment as it exists or could exist. So conceptually, we examine the environments around us and not just the environments within. In this use case, exploring the model threat actor perspective will go a step further than the traditional pen testing or red team, blue team methods. Traditional proactive methods performed to evaluate security of the system utilizes lessons learned from pen testing teams or red team, blue team events. And those are traditionally conducted in a simulated cyber attack or authorized environments to identify gaps, but they're also used within a boundary of a system or an environment under test. We want to take our research efforts beyond the boundary. We want to examine all aspects of technology on our networks, systems, from each piece of hardware and software utilized. Many cases, we focus on what is within our control, within our boundaries that we have set. However, what about the hardware and software that are not in our control, but could interact with our environments, with our networks, with our systems? What technology would a threat actor have that may not exist in one's current environment, but could be used to attack our systems? We want to know if we can utilize AI and machine learning techniques and models to help us research these technologies to help identify weaknesses and gaps. In modeling the threat actor, can we look to development of these machine learning models to help simulate more comparative actions that model a threat actor, model the actions that they would take? Research and development activities can help us examine the processes that an actor may use, as well as the process that we use in response. So utilizing machine learning to help orchestrate this can provide key knowledge to how threats are found, how they're exploited, how we should respond. And then it also offers the question, if a machine can predict the response, should we change it? We're doing that kind of work today. So we are expanding the use of machine learning to identify gaps. We're using machines even now to find novel ways around rule-based systems, right? Just like advanced threats. We're then using what we learn from there to update our defenses in an iterative cycle. If we research the processes that a threat actor is using as well, what can we learn in that response? So if we're taking it from is there a way that we can learn about the process and the techniques that a threat actor might use to create a deterrent or to create a stronger defense mitigation capability that someone could use to deploy? If we find something new, can we create a deterrent, such as a self-imposed system that could shut down or block out attackers? This might take our systems offline temporarily, but would it keep out the attack is some of the questions that we want to ask. Is there something common in our own processes and how we typically respond or move on a chessboard, if you will, that attackers are prepared for? The challenge here is to conduct our research such that we model a threat actor, but that we're looking for actors that we may or may not know, and then developing a response for something we've never seen. When we ask the question of how we can work faster to identify gaps and secure them, we have to remember that research and development traditionally takes a long time. Threat actors, though, they're agile and they're advancing. So we have to anticipate and engage in the same manner. Advanced threats are more subtle. This all motivates the cyber AI and ML efforts to help create intelligence and recognize threats and data that might take a human longer. We want to make sure in addition, that we tailor our research and development efforts to focus on smaller tasks, which could provide enough information to form a defensive cell of an issue or a gap, and then update those defenses with the new information, large or small. Focused research and development efforts provide the insight into the boundaries that exist and then could be broken. So the outcome here of when we're focusing on research development efforts, more modeling the threat actor will provide us with an enhanced strategy. Our goal here is that can we enhance from our current strategy to just maybe not necessarily change what we're doing, but add in addition to, right? Is there a way that we can enhance our strategy to create a more of a diverse viewpoint to deploy and engage? Our defenses are informed in this enhanced strategy by threats modeled from an actor activity, and not just modeled from testing focused on a system looking for flaws or vulnerabilities. In the use of the enhanced strategy, we've evolved the way we approach how we identify gaps and weaknesses in the system. The goal is to utilize not just one strategy, but to utilize both, but recognize the strength and weaknesses of both. Initially, when we think of enhancements to cybersecurity, we think of adding more security layers, software solutions, processes to an environment. But we always have to remember that everything that we add could create a new attack surface, could create a new problem, and has to always be considered. Taking the chess game, the example of the chess game in mind, our current strategy follows what we know about the game already, the moves, the players. We know the boundaries of the board. Adversaries do not work within the boundaries of the board. So our R&D activities can help propel outside those boundaries of the board. The goal is to enhance defensive moves such that a knight can move like a queen. We want to position our enterprises and our entities to be in a situation such that if they're surprised by a threat actor activity, we can react and recover quicker without conceding the entire game. We want to, when the cyber deterrence methods will be hard to deploy, the lessons learned and the capabilities developed during R&D can help provide insights on informing defensive to create deterrence methods, but it won't be easy. In this enhanced strategy, we want to create processes and tactics to keep up with the modernization of technology. As in chess, we follow a process. We know moves and tricks, but when the board changes or a knight suddenly moves like a queen, what do? Technology modernization calls for an enhancement of our processes to really fit into the 21st century technology. Change is always not necessary because one process or tactic might work against a threat. It's having new techniques and new ideas for new threats in addition to what we've already done. when it comes to people, it's important that we train our cyber workforce to research and identify new ways to find vulnerabilities, to recognize those gaps that could be exploited by a model threat actor. We have to ensure that our trained workforce is trained with tools against technology of today and tomorrow. Under this strategy, we also want to increase information sharing among private and public sector, which we've seen lately, especially with the SolarWinds attack. This means that there's more data to consume, and we can understand that more data could be sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. But this also motivates the use of cyber AI and ML efforts during research and development efforts to accelerate things and understand how actors move via the data and the intel that we receive better. It provides each sector the knowledge of threats that they might be aware of and defenses that they could possibly deploy against. Lastly, we really want to leverage the Cyber Safety Review Board. The Cyber Safety Review Board, created by the President's recent executive order 14028 on cybersecurity, is similar in idea to the FAA Review Board, where we will work to review and identify incidents after and learn from them. The one thing here that we want to do is we want to push that a step further. We want to make sure that we recreate, if possible, the techniques used to help support defensive measures. We want to ensure that the output from the board and the findings not only go to a report, but that they go back to a research and development team or a lab so that they can learn and explore and further enhancements to improve our threat defenses. So in some cases, in some ways, think of it as these outputs must also be released real time or worked in parallel with teams, research teams. Our old process of delayed responses will not help when technology moves so fast. So as the board learns new information or the teams learn information, we can have a team working in parallel to recreate those incidents, see where we can identify gaps, and then share that information among the public, the private sector, and those who might be most affected by that. So in conclusion, there's a strong support to conduct research out the realm of the current environment. If there was zero trust with every piece of hardware or software or human that could touch an enterprise, what would be needed for trust? If all the moves executed on a chessboard resulted in the outcome that a user would never win, would you not play? In reality, in an ever-changing cyber environment, we need to proactively identify gaps before our adversaries who are moving at the same pace or sometimes not even faster than the pace that we can defend against. If we can use research and development to enhance that, to identify those gaps and hopefully create capabilities for deterrence, that will then hopefully allow us to enhance the resilience of our systems and our defenses. Thank you for your time today.